Okay, I'm gonna move this closer to you guys because I feel like you're more soft-spoken. 我錄緊啦。
已經錄緊啦。
Yeah.
Oh shit! I was yapping about so much shit.
Well, that's what you yap about.
Hey guys.
We should totally start with 你頭先個 question. Why do men
have their tits out?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
我覺得我哋可以 like just jump right into it.
Tits? 我諗我唔講嘢咁樣。
歡迎大家嚟到
不務正業。
Heads in the clouds.
Yeah. 我哋可以 skip the formalities and introductions.
Yeah.
總之 for context 就係 Juniper's finally back. Actually, Juniper and Yui is back from their trip. 有冇 updates 㗎？有冇 like brief summary of what happened on the trip?
冇，我諗嗰個 trip 係 more so I've been describing it as like a home run season. Home run as in I feel like this whole season is like building up like 所有 things that I've been working on like interdependently for a very long time and then externalizing them and like kind of tying the knot a little bit before coming back. So it felt like that, and then we were moving a lot. We did an organizing, fundraising campaign, skills shared, resource sharing, like booth event for the whole weekend. And then I had prints out for the first time, so that was cool.
Yeah.
So that was
and exciting things coming up.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. 但係我諗個 trip 就係咁 it's weird because like time is very relative and fluid right now. 所以純粹有啲似係點一點嗰個感覺 instead of a trip that's very significant. I feel like I'm in a soul age where things don't feel like they're in like their own events. It's simply a point of where it's externalized for you to experience. 但係 the whole like it's this constant no beginning, no end sensation where you've learned to embrace and hold that turbulence and change at the same time and celebrate that.
即係 as in you feel like things 係已經 in motion 啦，可能 a long time ago, and who you're becoming has always 即係 meant to be in a sense, that kind of feeling.
I think more so I think this season 一個 pretty cool thing 係 being able to peel down all the layers, like comfortable in my own skin and my queerness and like who I am and the roles I'm taking up in the revolution, but also 嗰個 becoming 我有同王月 we had a conversation 就係我而家 becoming it's not becoming who I am anymore, it's more like entrenching and alchemizing. Like seeing how that imbues with what is always ebbing and flowing. So that's always, as much as it's very turbulent, it's very tumultuous, it's fulfilling and rewarding in its own sense. In a way, it's like the fruit of the labor, but also the labor is simultaneously, consistently happening. So I think it's a good place to be.
I really love how our seasons are in sync in some ways.
Yeah.
因為 interestingly, this is also a time of great change for me. Without going too much into that, but high fulfilling. And also I get what you said about, so I feel like this is someone I've always meant to grow into around. And it also about the seed thing, right?
Yeah.
So it's been sown a long time ago.
Yeah.
And just watching it finally happen. So obviously, it's a passive process though. It doesn't just happen. So it takes a lot of effort to my manifesting and just like consistent. Yeah.
Not even discipline. I feel like discipline is such an overused and individualized Western word, but it's consistency in your intention because it manifests in very nuanced and drastically different ways for different people.
Like intentions are the thing. Let's say in so many aspects of life, 即係唔係淨係 career, but also the way you live your life. 就係究竟有冇 intention, which 即係一個 prerequisite 係你要 introspective 你要知道你要行咁樣去諗咯。Because I feel like this might not be the default option for a lot of cities.
For most people. Also, especially under increasingly unlivable conditions within inequitable systems and systems of oppression and domination, I feel like people who already might not have as much capacity to explore that has exponentially less time and energy to do so. So I think that's a part. But I do feel like there is a balance between being radically honest with the version of who you are now, even if it's not someone you would wish that you would be already. Also, there's no such thing as that. That's a fallacy for sure.
Well, I mean, about our current seasons, are they basically when we're online, like our online presence 係已經 summarized 咗 what we're doing, on your podcast 嗰個 Instagram on your platform, which is our grounding foods, right?
And my personal
and also
Argonauts.
Yeah. I'm gonna tag all those, but enough about that for now 啦，因為今次係我哋個 second meetup after you guys came back.
Yeah.
係啦，咁要 catch up 嘅都 catch up 咗啦。We've had conversations. 今日呢一個 episode 都係好 spontaneous 嘅 but we were thinking, what do we want to actually talk about? 咁我就之前問過
Sorry, 我想加插一樣嘢
Yeah.
That's a funny looking island.
I know. Tit Island.
Yeah, actually.
Right?
But it would be
I don't
nice
know
if it's
its name.
green,
What?
Like, if tits are rooted in nature and even externalized that way. Imagine if tits are
Everything
covered
is-
in mosses. Wouldn't that be fucking awesome? Yes.
It's kind of hot.
Right? Sorry.
Somehow everything becomes
Let's jump
related.
back into the podcast.
Oh god.
What were you talking about?
Oh.
你開緊一個嘢
Yeah. About what we're gonna talk about today, vaguely, good direction. 因為 there was this question I shot you the last time we met, no? 因為 I realized for all the conversations we've had, we never really went deep into 你嗰陣時一個what feels like lifetimes ago 嘅 experience 啦 which is 你去讀 the culinary arts 啦 and also your experience working in
like fully
一啲
Michelin.
Exactly, 嗰啲 restaurants, the entire
Right.
system,
Right.
and look at that
Which?
bird of prey, 唔知咩品種 falcon, eagle,
Where?
in front of the white building.
Cool. I'm an eagle.
唔知啊，真係
Hi, Dad.
Hi, Dad.
好靚。我想講我去咗 Kiduri Farm 咁多次之後咧，我而家 kind of 有啲 new favorite animals 咯。And I realized it's so true that 我哋係淨係 conserve what we love 咯。即係 so many of my friends 咧 growing up in Hong Kong 可能其實純粹係冇咩機會接觸，又或者接觸親都係啲唔好嘅經歷咯。一個好好嘅 example 係雀咯。
Yeah.
A lot of people are scared of birds.
Oh my god, I need to tell you
Pigeons,
something. Maybe you already know that. You know what's really fucked up and it also tells us about the state of humanity and this fucking society?
What?
Pigeons were domesticated by human beings. But then now,
Yeah, I know where you're going with
it's
this.
not
Yeah.
useful and purposeful to the society that
Yeah.
systems of oppression and domination are building upon anymore. Suddenly there's something that's trivial and even worthless.
Or even 佢哋當係 pest 咁樣。
Yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy how transient 同埋 subject to change 呢啲嘢係。
Right. Yeah.
But if only people 會可以 see that and acknowledge that,
Yeah, but that also like goes back to having the education and access to decolonizing the ways of being, because that affects the way you relate in nature. Like you're disconnected with nature because you're disconnected to yourself, because we are nature. And I think that part allows, again, corporations, domination, oppressions to continuously happen, but it allows them to exploit and extract for justifiable reasons for resources. What were we talking about?
I don't know.
Oh, we were talking about the
It's
Michelin.
fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
I feel like we can go back to that for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, 你話你有啲新嘅鍾意嘅。
Oh yeah, you were talking
We had
about
like
that.
multiple tangential
Yeah,
points.
right,
But
yeah.
Well, I'm gonna ask you guys if they
Sure.
are favorite animals.
好多。
我可以講，即係 I mean，
Right.
我頭先提起 Kiduri， I think birds is one of the species，就係因為一
yeah.
開始 the reason I got to know， 即係或者第一次接觸加道理就係我送咗一隻 pigeon 入，sorry that wasn't a pigeon，that was a spotted dove 咁樣啦。 that was the first time when I learned 佢哋點樣 define 某啲 species， 因為 one of the first questions that 加到你嗰邊嘅 staff 問我咧就係，oh you need to identify whether it's a spotted dove or just a common pigeon， 因為 common pigeon 佢哋唔收嘅 so that's where 我又知道原來有呢個 status 嘅係啦，即係佢哋淨係可以保護或者淨係會保護係啦野生雀鳥而唔係家禽咁樣係啦 anyway 咁就送咗入去，但係我嗰個 experience 就係其實都有少少似頭先所講嘅，即係你唔接觸得多嘅話，其實你就會 fear something you don't know， 因為being an animal lover, I don't fear birds as some of my other peers do. 但係嗰下我要 handle 佢，即係我要捉佢咧。嗰下有啲淆底，即係 I was like, oh my god， 跟住攞住個紙皮箱嘅。
好驚 like hurt.
Yeah, and then fast forward like half a year, and then now I've been handling birds, you know, and then you start to 可以 get a closer look, start to appreciate 佢哋 as a species, the differences, 或者 the similarities. Yeah, I feel like you can only love something when you get to know them. And that's the disconnect between city dwellers and nature.
Yeah. I think there's definitely always the balance between wilderness and civilization. But there's also this gap between how honest can we be with the distance that we put ourselves. Yeah. Oh, going back to my favorite. I don't have favorites. But I think for me what is symbolic would be a cardinal.
Ooh.
Yeah. Specifically a red cardinal, which I'm forgetting if it's female or male.
Because?
It seems that in various seasons of my life, emblematic seasons of like transformation and like sitting with grief long enough for it to be transformative and that I can mobilize, there's always precedence of like cardinals. I remember when my dad was having like he was going through his final stages of cancer, there's a red cardinal that would sit right outside my window in front of my dorm among the prairies every morning. So that was something that's symbolic to me. And it resembles phoenix, which is also for me another spiritual species, because the tears of phoenixes are healing. So I like the combination of them. And also masculine and feminine imbuing majestic beauty thing. Ooh, also really love planktons.
Oh yeah.
I love planktons.
They're weird actually.
They're weird as shit, but also they're so vital to our ecosystems.
Pretty interesting. 我同你哋諗係唔同。Like I love.
Are you gonna say something like tit related?
No, I was gonna say jellyfishes. I like sharks.
海係嘅，
I like reptiles.
I knew that was.
Like,
I also love that.
Yeah.
That I can't really choose a favorite, so I pick something that's symbolic.
Snakes.
I love
Yes,
snakes.
yes.
I do love snakes.
Yeah.
I feel like okay, you point out 就係你哋兩個都有 you guys are like divers. 我係 like 將會係嚟緊7月尾會去學咯。I wonder if 即係個 proximity 又或者 your access to the ocean
Probably,
contribute
for
to
sure. Like the privilege of like growing up snorkeling, that's huge. Yeah. But also our dad.
Yeah.
His like ocean, aquatic, that's his life passion.
I think it's also a huge part of me.
Yeah?
Yeah. 因為譬如即係 on land I'm more anxious than when I technically can breathe underwater.
Yeah.
但係 everything's like so.
But that's
I'm like part of. 我入到個海嘅時候覺得嘅，即係嗰度先係我嘅 home 嘅感覺。
That's what Juniper said about 即係我哋係 part of nature, that we are nature.
Yeah.
And 我想講即係 this reminds me of 因為我尋日啱啱 freshly 睇完一個 documentary 叫做 My Octopus Teacher 啊 I'm not sure if you guys are aware of 因為2020年拍嘅 so it was a while back but I mean it's been making the rounds on Netflix recently 咁樣跟住我睇都係因為有一個 friend recommend 啦咁 yeah it was surprisingly 係一個好 remarkable 同埋好 intimate 嘅 narrative 即係 it's not like really regular nature documentaries it's about a specific man 一個 filmmaker 咁樣啦 ，maybe 即係喺人生一個有啲 lost 嘅時期咁樣，咁但係佢就又係因為佢 grew up in 即係 near the coast in Cape Town 有啲位啊，好似咁就有一個好靚嘅 kelp forest with its entire ecosystem 咁樣，咁佢就 kind of found一個 newfound purpose， 又或者你可以話揾翻自己嘅，即係又或者 something to look forward to 咁樣，就係 he literally went there every day for 300 plus days 咁樣啦，咁每日就係想 learn more about a particular octopus as well， 咁佢就有一個 form your bond with the animal 啦。But one of the really nice quotes towards the end of the documentary 就係佢話 one of the things that 佢或者呢段關係，又或者呢300幾日 every day 即係 going to the kelp forest 教識佢嘅就係佢係 part of 呢樣嘢咯 ，part of 呢個世界，我哋唔係一個 visitor 咯。So that's a huge difference. Feeling like a visitor and actually knowing that you're part of this world.
Yeah.
Oh my god, that was like a Little Mermaid. But no, also I would recommend it. Just because another thing that struck me when you said one of your favorites 係 jellyfish 咯，因為 it's not a conventional answer.
Yeah.
But also I feel like it's just because 我哋唔熟悉呢個生物啊。即係 I can't even name like 5 jellyfish facts 咁樣，而我亦都冇近距離見過啦。Like maybe
they're so old 同埋
係啊係啊
Oh yeah.
有啲係 before dinosaurs 已經喺度。
Yep.
有啲似係咯，即係個 octopus 咯。佢又係講話其實 essentially it's just like a mollusky kind of creature. It's like a snail that lost its shell 咁樣啦。所以其實我諗個 filmmaker 係 me and him both 啦，就係好 in awe of 佢嘅 intelligence 同埋係即係你唔知 what 佢哋 capable of 咯。佢喺個 documentary 度有 show 到一啲可能求生嘅 moments 啊，同埋一啲好 quick witted 即係 fast thinking of like avoiding pajama sharks 咁樣啦之類啦。但係唔睇個 documentary 我都唔知原來佢哋係有咁樣嘅 capacity 嘅，即係 all you see online 最多係話 like oh my god smart octopus opens a jar， 又或者咩 goes through a maze 咁樣。
Oh my god, yeah, and also the idea of like social media, like the portrayal of animals, as in like the portrayal of nature as something that's only purposeful to
entertain,
our construct
or to consume. Yeah.
Right. Like 之前 I think something that's absolutely whack is like the octopus with the football teams.
Oh.
What?
Like during the
世界盃嗰陣時。
fucking 世界盃
嗰陣時就係嗰個 octopus 會揀邊隊贏咁樣咯。
Oh god, I was never.
Also 點解世界盃個 focus 係 man 啊？又係 another huge.
I think that's
sports
like,
in general.
Sports. That's another.冇嘢開。That's another series.
No, for sure.
That's one of the byproducts of patriarchal and toxic masculinity, but also the inherent dominance of male species and cisgendered roles.
I can't believe there's still a conversation about how 即係有啲人仲係 argue 緊話my god, I mean like trans women in sports. 即係有啲人仲係 argue 緊話 men 係 superior physically and everything.
If you think about it, there's still people who are climate deniers, and I think that tells a lot about why people will argue about trans women or trans.
Cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, more than that.
係啊 more than that， 但係呢個係好多
It's for another day.
Yeah.
I would gladly jump back into jellyfish.
Yeah.
I mean, and tits.
Yeah.
Actually. 我知我問你咩問題。I think it's a question I ask a lot. 因為我覺得 people don't really know, like realize it, but in your nuance form, you've all had like experiences of living under inequitable systems. And the constant pull and tear, the metronome, like of wanting to relate deeper and then not having the capacity and then not being able to fully recuperate from that scarcity. But how do you think, especially with 你做醫生 and then being in an institutionalized like medical system, how do you think that affected your relation within the nature and the root of your practice? What's why you started it?
Oh god. 意思係 why I started what I'm doing now.
Yeah, and anything. But the root of relating to core parts of whether it's yourself or what you're, the extension of that. So what you're doing.
Ooh, that's so difficult. That's so difficult.
長嘅呢個 question.
That's a great question, actually. So I feel like subconsciously,
yeah.
又或者即係 without spelling it out 咧，即係 I must have figured this question out.
Yeah.
Because
everyone has their
yeah,
own. Yeah.
Just because 我而家做緊即係 the path that I'm gonna take,
Right.
即係 I must have 已經 solved 咗呢個 puzzle. 但係 I don't think I've ever spoken about it, even to myself.
Right.
一個好 simple 嘅 answer 就係 I feel like I'm finally awake 同埋I'm finally awake 因為其實之前都有同其他人講過就係 it might sound shit 啦，但係其實即係 getting into medical school 係個 default， 即係 it was the path, it was the path of least resistance。咁所以 I wouldn't say 我個 state 係 awake 嘅， it's more like playing into what I've been taught. Definitely not blaming, my parents did not 佢哋冇講過話要我讀呢一科啦。So it's a lot of societal things.
Right.
又或者係我嘅 internalized things. It's not even them. It's not even someone telling me I have to do this or do that. It's an internalized 即係this is what I should do. 又或者係一種由細個就會俾人灌輸即係if you have the ability then go for it， 即係就算唔係 for the money 嘅，就算係 for the helping people part 都係if you can do it just do it。咁當然我嗰陣時 because once 你嘅 thinking 係 set 又或者你已經有個 conclusion 咧 everything else 都可以用嚟 justify 呢個 decision 嘅，包括我會講過話即係因為我係理科即係 free can buy 咁 either you like become an engineer 即係 you can be in a lab, you can be in research, or 即係如果你想對人嘅話我係點樣咁咪做醫生咯。咁當然有好多 unspoken 嘅嘢即係 the privileges of being a doctor, the 係都唔係錢啦，即係 also the status 啦 whatever. But yeah, so that was the easiest decision 咯。總之咁所以唔係一個好 awake 好 fully aware 嘅 decision. Sure, there was a part of me that knew 就係可能應該報其他嘢喎，即係 because I've always loved animals， 所以有報 zoology 啦，有 zoology offer， 但係要去外國同埋即係可以好 honest 咁講就係我 lack the courage 去 give up 一個 HKU medicine 嘅 offer 去讀 zoology 啦，即係 that felt reckless to me 啦。但係其實 on retrospect 我只不過係冇咁嘅勇氣啦。咁樣咯，咁所以 back to your question， 咁一路就又讀啦，讀完就做啦。It's still a very typical, 你個 Hong Kong, yeah, just not being too awake。咁同埋 in a way I feel it's fair in a sense that 我係真係可以 grow to love this job。Yeah. And also 即係 very honest answer 就係 I don't hate this job at all, even up till this point. That's why I stayed for so many years。但係 this is where I feel 即係你個 question 係好 interesting 嘅，就係點解我要 at 呢個 juncture make 呢個 decision 咯，即係 even though I don't hate my job。咁 this is where 嗰個 culture 同埋 workplace 同埋成個 system 嗰樣嘢 comes into play 咯。就係我覺得 I started to feel as I become more eco-conscious 啊，又或者想be more in touch with nature 啊等等啊，I just feel like an alien in 我個 workplace， so, which is fine to be honest， 因為 that's where即係 one can make the biggest difference in terms of advocacy 同埋 activism， 就係因為我咁 alien， 又或者就係因為唔夠人 care about 呢樣嘢 in that space， 所以我先有係我做嘅嘢有 value 咁樣咯。But in the long run， 即係 it's a bit taxing， 又或者人始終有個 tendency 去 gravitate towards finding your people， 係 just your people。咁 that was not the space。And then of course 即係 about the system，working in HA 咁樣，for sure 係有啲好有心同埋好 inspiring 嘅 doctors，but not enough I think。有時因為呢啲係push and pull 嘅啫，即係我都覺得 okay I might like something else more，like animals or whatnot。但係如果個 workspace 又或者呢個 community 係 good enough， 又或者係有嘢挽留到我，其實我會 stay 噶嘛。But I feel like maybe not enough 咯，因為個 majority 都係可能 people who stay for the stability。即係你梗係可以話你係想幫人又或者點樣啊咁 ，and I don't doubt that。只不過you know that a major part of God's decision 係個 stability and the financial compensation, because I know for a fact that there are many people who would rather 即係 they have other interests 又或者 if they take money out of the equation they might be doing something else entirely.
Yeah.
I know. But again 冇對與錯啦, and I also really look up to people who has to stay because of a multitude of reasons, 包括 a family, having to raise kids. Yeah. But at least for me 即係我就係有呢個 privilege of not having 呢一啲 worries at the moment. And back to your question 就係個 feeling of being out of place. 係but I don't know 即係 I feel like 係the system 同埋嗰一個hierarchy 成件事即係 in the public system 係 contribute 咗好多種 experience, because that's also the only experience I had.
Right.
係我又冇試過喺 private 度做，我又冇試過 so for sure 可能換個模式係可能會有少少唔同，但係 so ultimately 就係呢個 season 可以 actually be more awake 同埋就係 living more consciously 咯 and more intentionally. I feel like this is a good summary of what happened 同埋 why I'm making these changes.
Yeah. Sweet.
That was a really great question that I will direct right back at you. 因為即係 the changes that you went through 咧係 exactly 即係 it's almost if not more radical 啊，因為你嘅 systems 你嘅 workplace 係 even more extreme.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Ooh. There's so many ways to answer this, but I definitely think the whole reason why I wanted to pursue food from the beginning, because food is a whole love language, but also it is the foundation of like humanity and the species of human being, and sustaining life that's beyond survival. Yes, it is sustenance, but there's also something that's beyond sustenance, that's within the collective imaginary scopes of our ways of being and existing. But I think it's one of the most dehumanizing experiences, and honestly, like you said, so much respect for people who for their own reasons or any reason have stayed in their craft and in the industry, because I could not have done that, and it's a privilege to be able to walk away from it. But also it's very, very demoralizing in many sense, because I feel like the most inequitable parts of the system is externalized, but in a way that's within the sustenance of existing. And so I've always thought about food not just as sustenance, but also being able to use that as a lens to think of the states of our worlds, and one of them being because it is sustenance, it's also weaponized. And the same thing goes to the labor under it. And noting that you should never stand up for people because of their labor. You should never thank them for their labor. You have to thank them for existing, because there's also this other part. Side note 就係因為ice rates 同埋 LA 最近發生嘅唔同嘢啦，有好多there's a very problematic narrative coming out 就係think about the people who grow your food, think about the people who pick your flowers and wash your dishes and all that. That's already a very fucked thing, because with this narrative there's this normalized and internalized class division between stratified systems of labors. But anyway, side note. 但係我話嗰個 experience 就係 living through how the systemic roots affect both the most vulnerable, but also the labor that goes under these systems, where the only way it's equitable is to abolish them. 但係呢一樣嘢就係 living through long working hours， 講緊toxic white cis men telling you if you're on your period, suck it up when they don't fucking have a vagina, that's and that whole situation. And in order for this work to be sustaining, you're almost certainly under some kind of white corporate company restaurant sibling groups, and their sense of community is still individualistic, right? It's still pertaining to their privilege and their supremacy. 但係成個 lived experience wise 就係 it's this constant split of like a multitude of worlds, because I know this is where I'm going. I want to use food to build equitable systems, because that's literally the bare minimum. Like it's a bare minimum for people to have access to nutritious food, not just food, right? But also the other part where they put you in the system and they tell you, oh, in order for you to advocate for change, to be change, you have to climb the ladder. That's what they all say, right? In order for you to continue to be docile, for you to continue to play their designated role for you, whatever that is.
And the system stays in place.
Right. 但係成個就係 within the industry, I'm also someone who's very immersive. I'm very hardworking, very diligent with work. And it's like, of course, like naming my privileges and my abilities and our access to exploring those landscapes. But there's also the part where it was a constant struggle. 因為 I'm not living according to my values, but you feel there's this emptiness because you know this is a lie. But then you're so deep into it where they you know, it's like it's really crazy 因為我個好 immersive 嘅 experience 令到我好短時間做咗 I started when I was 16 because that was the only way that it would work. All of it is from experience. I go from stages, which stages for people who might not have access to the knowledge, stages 係當你入一個準備見工嘅時候咧，佢就話 okay, you can come in for a stage. Basically, for a lot of it's a tool for further exploitation and extraction because they're like, oh, I'm going to start you and they don't pay you.
Okay.
At most, they give you food, maybe.
Like an
if they're
unpaid
nice.
internship.
Right. Like
exposure.
for one day, for one day to test your abilities to see if you're compatible with our values. That's what they all say.
And what do you actually have to do? 即係佢有冇 duty 俾你？
No, you actually work for the day. There are fucked up companies where they just like there's a role that's for the stages.
Okay.
So they can underhire.
光明正大
Right.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that I worked through. Like I did breads. I did was a chef representative to create like menus and pop-up items like wine and dine festivals, and then I did like the Michelin training. I was at like the resort things. I did plated dessert. So like an array of things. 因為 my like the CIA gogo, which of course there's a lack of accountability with the absence of speaking of anything that's indigenous and the sovereignty of indigenous people and stolen lands, like 呢樣嘢係冇嘅。但係 also the very Michelin like whitewashed system of, you know, the 全部都係 you know, you learn the basic techniques.
Yeah.
即係佢哋界定嘅 basic techniques,
Okay.
right? And then you go through and I worked like confectionery and 少少 like a mix of different things, because I thought I never, like you said, I never hated my job. I loved it. I didn't love my job. I loved the nature of food. I hated the system, right? But I think when you had less experience, when you had less exposure to the systemic ties, even though you've always observed the patterns of it and how it affects you and collectively, you still have to play the game a little bit. You still have to like, I tried all the different ways to like invoke change and advocate for change.
From within the system.
Right, from within the system. I did everything to intercept. I did, like, for example, when I did the pop-up menu, it was like rooted in locality and seasonality and plant-based foods, and like having exposure to what, you know, I think there's a lot of, one of the aspects of and like a byproducts of late-stage capitalism and these systems of oppression and domination is that food is commodified. And therefore, you have these cut-up julienne foods, and with 70%, 80% of food waste just to make perfect matchsticks, right?
Yeah.
And that's a whole fucked up thing that pertains to the richest people, and that also explains it, externalizes it. Literally in food, you visualize the scapes of our society and culture. 但係 to live through that and have to work for that, it's like this constant compartmentalization of things in order to function. But there was a point, I don't know when I was in burnout, and I suffered like many of my peers, like chronic eating disorders, and I had sciatica and muscle spasm and like potential cartilage loss when I was like probably 19, 20, right? And there comes to a point where I constantly do not have the capacity to bridge the gap anymore between what I value and want to live with intention and in alignment with that acute intentionality and the system itself. Like the gap was closing and I couldn't separate them, and I didn't recognize who I was, because your environment changes you, your culture changes you. So in many sense, to me it still feels like a lens, as much as it is very, very traumatic. It also allows the small moments where I was in touch with the overarching span of human life and human stories more poignant and important, because those are the lifelines. Like if there's no silver lining of like, oh, let us sang a team working your ass off together on this project, if you're not seeing that whole part, I don't think anyone could survive ever. So I think, that part is, I am so privileged to have experiences, but also have the ability and bandwidth to immediately notice it and walk away from all of it, right? But also not as in starting from scratch. It's like starting from that foundation of everything I set with, because I refused to take those experiences for granted. I knew at every step those were lessons that will enrich who I am.
For sure.
And now it's like something that I can use. 除咗即係對我嚟講 politics, like if your politics doesn't have field work, for me that's regressive. 因為你可以講好多 theory of change, and again those things are inherently Western and white and idealized by these theories, that if there's no field work to gap living realities and your politics, that's very, very irradical and very, very regressive and destructive. So 呢樣嘢令到我除咗 help like form perspective 之外, but it's like innately built in within me, where I maintain the humbled and rooted version of myself always, because I know what it feels like to work under those conditions, because I started from like, they were paying me below minimum wage, which was fucking illegal, of course. I was paid $11 an hour in Boston. But also seeing what systems of domination and oppression, like the tools that they use to exploit. So like having all of that and then really piecing them together. So in many ways I'm really glad and I'm really proud and grateful and joyous for the person I've become, because it could have easily been like me putting up walls from these experiences and not going into them and not having introspection, instead of using them now to connect the dots, but also visualize how that means for different people. So I'm grateful for the exposure, because I think those are really unique experiences where you can read as much as you can, but there's nothing compared to lived experiences. And being able to mobilize and alchemize that.
I would even argue that it's necessary, experience to
absolutely.
You becoming who you are now.
Right.
And I mean, I relate to that. The same applies. So it always baffles me when people ask,你有冇覺得is there wasted time? Especially given 我呢一行係讀咗6年，跟住再加做咗可能3-4年咁樣。Do you feel it's wasted? And it baffles me, because I feel like 首先就係 all medicine 係通嘅，我覺得。
Right.
Yeah， 即係先唔好講你嘅 mental， 即係the resilience that you built, the people you got to know， 即係 all that。Obviously I don't regret a single second of that。但係 just like commenting on 個 knowledge base 又或者學你話齋，即係你嘅 experience 亦都幫到你 connect the dots now.
Right.
I also feel the same 即係 about 我嘅 experience as 一個 doctor in 個 hospital authority 咁樣，咁所以 yeah I totally relate to.
And I feel like in some sense it deepened my relations instead of like the disconnect. It allows me to have more empathy and humanize to an even greater extent, to an unfathomable extent at times. Because I'm like, even within oppression, everything is a spectrum. There are a lot of people who are born in, like, no one's beyond accountability, and like, of course, that's that whole part. But understanding the mechanisms behind why to them this is justifiable is something that's also really important in the work, in liberatory groundwork and ground schools. So I think that's a big part.
Dude, 我想講 since we're 即係 talking about food 咧，其實頭先我就已經諗緊just because I care about animals quite a bit, the relationship between food and animals and how as the Chinese we basically view the animals as food. 即係畫咗個等號啊，即係又或者 even to use language to further widen the gap 咧，即係我哋唔想 think of the meat as coming from like a live animal, so we call them like veal, you know, just like language, the language part. 但係另外一個我想講嘅 before I forget 就係你頭先講到 food waste 咧，how we use like 即係我哋係 tossing, we're throwing away 70-80%。跟住我就諗起 you know shark fin.
Yeah.
即係
Oh God.
Dude, when the waste 係the loss of a life. Yeah, I don't even know where to begin. 即係純粹係諗起係直情係有個畫面，即係 we get the fin and then we toss away the life.
So mad.
Yeah, it's so messed up and
very sickening for sure.
唔知點解好 I don't know about other cultures enough to comment. That I feel like as like a Chinese person looking at Chinese people, they take it to another level. I would say, 即係you hunt species down for food to a degree where they go extinct.
Right. I think like you know what's interesting? I think this goes back to it's a scarcity mindset, and I think when it stems from a scarcity mindset, no matter how it's externalized, it goes back to exploitation, it goes back to oppression and domination. Think of genocide, think of ethnocide and ecocide. It's justifiable for them to mass murder indigenous people and steal their lands because those are valuable resources. And that is the mindset behind people who justifies like unethical behaviors, like obtaining shark fins. So it's like, okay, in the mindset of scarcity exacerbated by capitalism and the systems we spoke about and the law, how do we continue to hold multiple truths but also deepen our relations to every life form on earth? And that's what will save us, and that's something we must do. Like it's not a choice anymore. It's always been a mandate thing. It's just that more and more now we're seeing the byproducts and multiplicities of how that could look like, and that goes to war, that goes to, you know, everything else. Ooh, building on the question. Building on 頭先嗰段嘢。The question 係how do you maintain a semblance of alignment while constantly being depleted of your capacities? What does that look like for you?
What?
It's super alright, no, elaborate more. Yeah.
即係講緊個 semblance of alignment 就係 I think it's definitely a facade that we're able to be, we can be radically honest, but I think under these systems right now, it's impossible for anyone to be in full alignment.
Oh God,
because you don't have capacity. So what does a semblance of alignment look like to you? And this question is directed to obliterate perfectionism, because I think that's really that adds to purist politics, but also cults of personality where only a few are selected to do advocacy work. So I think like, what does that look like for you?
It's so difficult. 我諗 prerequisite 係首先要好 in touch with who you are 同埋自己嘅 values 啦。即係首先我好要 firm 咗呢樣嘢先，即係你自己嘅 pillars 夠 firm 先，係啦。咁然後就係 comes to 我諗起一個例子係咧，即係你咪話like 我好似 keep 即係 I'm friends with a variety of a large variety of people.
Yes.
I'm tempted to not use the word tolerance 啦，因為 I wouldn't say 即係好似講到要 tolerate， 即係純粹係自己嘅 tolerance 好大或者接受到嘅嘢。
你個 bandwidth for that.
Yeah, because I also hold so much love for them， 又或者 just different people。但係我諗起一個 moment 就係一個好即係好 friend 嘅 colleague，純粹係 call 緊嘅時候食緊飯咁樣，跟住講起，佢仲要講起係因為 out of 佢嘅 kindness of 佢知道我中意動物咁樣，咁佢就話你有冇去過長隆嗰個 zoo 啊？係啦，咁嗰個 moment 我就即係 it really it was like a moment 咁樣啦。咁但係咧I didn't feel like that was the time nor place to raise the issue of like oh my god I actually do not stand 係啊 cannot stand 呢樣嘢，同埋佢哋好唔 ethical 係啦。但係嗰個 moment 就係有我諗就係你所講嘅嗰個 dissonance 喺嗰度係啦。咁但係你話 what does it look like 又或者我會點樣 go about coping with 呢樣嘢，就係我頭先講咗 prerequisite 啦。咁當你清楚咗你自己啲 pillars 同埋 values之後，其實 it's a whole lot easier，因為所有嘢都好 intentional， 同埋你係有嘢想做到嘅，即係尤其是 in advocacy and activism spaces。之所以你唔想太 abrasive， 或者之所以你要好似 compromise，好似要 put up a facade 咁樣，但係其實 it's not just being fake 或者想 appease 人，反而嗰個 outcome 你想做到嘅嘢係要 bridge 到個 gap 啊嘛，即係你係要 communicate 到 with 呢啲人啊嘛，因為如果我下下太 radical 嘅話，it's just gonna be us and them， 即係永遠就有個 gap 喺度，佢又覺得你 crazy， 你又覺得佢係 intolerable， 同埋即係 just no 咁樣，咁所以咪要變咗揾一個middle ground， 又或者你係要揾到一個方法係去 walk this fine line，where 你係可以 stay true to 你自己，but at the same time appeal to 佢哋 and get their attention，get people on your side，which is incredibly difficult， 同埋個 balance 係難攞到嘅。
What did you say afterwards？ 你有冇講啲咩先？
其實因為食緊飯，跟住又講緊其他嘢咧。Basically, I smiled and nodded。即係 I definitely should have.
There are times.
Yeah， 因為 I feel like 同埋佢個 awareness 係唔到位。即係 while I know her mean no harm 啦，但係 at the same time I didn't feel that a conversation at that point 會係 progress， 又或者會 achieve 到任何嘢。咁所以 I kind of saved it。I kind of saved it。我會覺得 through what I usually say like。IG story 又好乜都好，即係 I feel like there would be another occasion where 佢會可以 softly 佢會 get 到咯。And I honestly don't blame people for that， 因為又係 access 同埋 knowledge 嘅問題。即係例如 before I saw 即係 about how 咪有 eye stalk ablation 嘅 practice for shrimps 嘅，因為你掹咗佢隻眼，佢會可以咩啊 reproduction 好啲啊，即係會生多啲 whatever。但係咁呢啲我又會係覺得啲係啲好啲 knowledge 你冇就係冇㗎啦，即係咁你唔可以怨啲人食蝦喎，如果佢唔知呢樣嘢咁樣，咁所以其實係一種 with access 同埋 knowledge 嘅。咁但係當然就係講緊有咗呢個 knowledge 之後，你點樣 act 咧？我就覺得係真係要 hold you accountable 㗎啦。即係有啲似Ursula Le Guin 嗰個 short story 咧，即係 The Ones Who Left Omelas。即係總之又係講起話，如果當你知道咗個 truth that the entire city happiness 係 built upon the suffering of one person， 你知道咗之後，你可以揀留低定係走啊嘛。咁 that's where 喂，咁你唔可以 blame 你唔知啦，你而家係知道咗㗎啦。So like keep your eyes open and 咁如果你決定咗留低 fine， 即係 I have nothing to say， 又或者你要 live with that fact 咯。
And also this like speaks to like genocide in Palestine. Like以而家個 access there's something complicated, but there's also no excuse because
no excuse,
literally like it's not like in the past where people have no access to like of course there's also this censorship, but there's also an increased level of misinformation, but this is a known fact that a genocide is happening. So I think that's like it's like a gap between I think it's something you shared in the past as well, like was it like do the best until you know better, and when you know better do better?
Oh yeah.
It was something we shared like a couple years back, I think. That's right.
And also just 我諗呢樣嘢就係佢哋好多時覺得係自己係一個 separate
A what？
即係如果人哋搞佢自己嘅屋企，咁當然佢就唔得啦。
哦，係啊，
我就覺得
係啊。
但係因為我唔係 Palestinian，因為
Dude, you know, I actually had this conversation with a good friend 咁樣啦，即係我又係 raise 個問題 of proximity 嘅，即係點解我哋永遠都係 find it easier to care about those in proximity to us and not farther？但係其實 when you 你當 debate mode 又好點都好，即係你 commit to 一個 statement 就係 human lives that are farther from you 係 worth less than those close to you， 你係即係你唔會咁講噶嘛，冇人會咁講噶嘛。咁但係我個 friend 嗰日 on a taxi ride， 即係佢係真係我唔記得 what exactly she said 啦，但係佢係佢唔 fully agree with 呢樣嘢嘅，即係佢 kind of justify 到點解 is it like a very Chinese school of thought 就係你係真係由嗰啲叫咩啊？即係你先搞好你屋企 and then you extend to your community.
I know.
Yeah, so I feel like it is actually an actual school of thought 嚟嘅，即係 it's not just
I don't think it's Chinese. I think it's
唔係㗎，由內而外咁樣嘅類似，都係咩管好 I can't
Isn't that an imperialist
自其身，跟住就你個屋企 and then your country, right?
Isn't the country first? Oh shit.
Yeah.
I mean, what they
literally
teach is not what I
true.
think. I'm just saying.
I don't know.
I think it's more case
the country first.
At the end of the
You
day,
don't even matter.
it's the fucking colonized truth, right?
係
Like
同一件事咯，就係
like it seems like okay, even if it's in our culture, Cantonese, Chinese, that 但係其實都係
even for the Western
it's
countries.
from Western because it's colonized, because it is also history told by victors. So when it's passed down without decolonizing that, it goes back to the same individualized form of struggle and liberation that separates liberations.
Yeah.
I think that's like yeah.
I don't know, but I find it really difficult too. 即係呢樣嘢係唔 sit well with me 㗎啦，因為我哋早前喺嗰個 Pride Bazaar 度搞 booth 咧，我哋咪話我哋會 donate 我哋啲 profits 嘅，跟住又係諗咗一諗，我哋寫邊啲organizations charities 出嚟咧，咁又係我哋會 find ourselves like having to take into account 就係like呢啲 charities 會唔會 speak to 嗰啲人啊？即係例如會唔會例如我揀 Hong Kong Dog Rescue， 係啦，香港嘅嘢係會好過例如 something as big and vague as 例如 UN refugees 啊，我甚至 Greenpeace 啊，又或者 Palestinian Children's Relief Fund 啊，即係呢啲其實會唔會所謂冇咁有 feel 嗰啲人，即係冇咁共鳴到啊？So yeah, an actual concern.
I think like go food 嗰樣嘢 I think why it's a missing piece for so many things, because one, it offers the language that is a decolonized form of language that allows your own connotation within holding a diversity of cultures. 但係講緊 going back to what is indigenous and ancestral instead of what is like taught by colonizers 或者 passed on by the whole Michelin and imperialist system. 但係it allows us to build bridges. 因為即係嗰個 food in itself, a lot of people, because it's something that's sustenance, a lot of people might not relate to what it means to have ecological collapses, 但係佢哋會明白係個 impact of okay, it means that 我哋嘅 food supply 你而家有嘅 diversity, it will shrink by 50%. There are types of foods that you will never see. So I think that is something that for me 係令到我可以 connect 個 interconnectedness, not just in spoken language, not just in narratives, but for them to innately be invoked by legal experience that very like literally you can digest. And I think that's something, and food memory is scientific. There's a reason why nostalgia 係俾人commodify to capitalize on, because that's something they knew too. Like if they can put some kind of fusion, deconstructed nostalgia flavor, like French toast and deconstructed on a plate, you're more compelled to order it because that's the flavor of nostalgia. Without knowing they're capitalizing on that. But similarly, something that's capable of abuse and destruction can be transformed into catalysts for opportunities and for expansion. So I think that's where I really focus on in my work, systemically, and using food to keep building the bridges, to keep opening up like conversations, but also allowing people to understand how interconnected it is. 因為你就算你 work 唔到 food is something you experience. It is a lived experience. And through that, I think it's similar as music. It's similar as art because you're able to visualize it and you're able to experience what is being visualized. And I think that is what we need in a revolution, to offer different components where we're constantly reimagining our interconnected practices. And food is something that is so basic in our existence. Not basic as in trivial, but basic as in it's fundamental, and it invokes what is innate within our interwoven humanity. And that's what will save us. And that's what we must continue to be radically honest with and be in alignment with to save us. So, yeah. I think 嗰個 part 就係 I definitely validate 嗰個 struggle between 要有乜一定程度 autonomously, intentionally delegated 嘅 quote-unquote palatability, if that's a common language, for more people to join the revolution or whatnot. 但係 within 嗰樣嘢，我哋嘅 practice 係 at our own capacity can be a little more disruptive. So I think what I sometimes do 係 如果我知道 I'm in this white space and this is something they're familiar with, right? I would put something they're familiar with alongside 一個好 diverse 嘅 range of like Black, trans, indigenous people and rightfully owned like farms and like all of that. And I literally, when we did that whole event, I have a community agreement 係話 please be mindful of the spaces you're taking up. If you're a body outside of you know, Black, indigenous, people of color, ANHPI diaspora, 嗰樣嘢. And it's like, I think there is a level of disruption that can happen with a corresponding level of care. 因為如果 there is, you know, there's no balance between your resistance and care, that's also regressive. That goes back to like doing more damage.
The same system.
Right. Yeah. It's like, it's the same system in a different font. So I think that's something I try to push because I find that every time I can push a little further. And that inspires other people to, one, because they feel represented, their ethos feels seen, but also it allows them to fathom something that they would not have the courage to do. And like that allows each of us in our own like capacity and our own roles to keep pushing things a little further. And it's a liberating and enriching experience. 同埋係咯，就係講返個 nuance forms of revolution 就係好多人覺得係一個好 like it's a very extreme act， 但係一直係嗰個係一個 false media portrayal and under and misrepresented portrayal of what activism and advocacy and revolution is， 但係同時間令到好多人睇唔到 the small things of 即係你睇到嘅嗰啲所謂好似 madleen 嗰個 I'm very, you know, this is going to be controversial, but 嗰樣嘢 of like, is coining madleen effect a really, you know, something that's effective for a movement? 你明唔明我講咩？因為 it goes back to madleen 嗰陣時其中一個 discussion that I really appreciated 就係講緊 the power dynamics within organizing, within like all of our spaces, right? 但係 organizing 今次你就係睇到其實 there have been activists from Turkey, from different like adjacent, like India, different people who have been going there for a very long time. 但係當 madleen 有呢樣嘢嘅時候immediately all the media is drawn to there. So that was something that 咁當然就係 validating all their efforts, like they're incredible comrades. 但係 例如講緊 madleen effect， 我會 concern 就係本來已經對於呢個 power dynamic 可能未有 access 去緊 radicalism 同埋 thinking more radically and in a decolonized manner critically 嗰樣嘢嘅人，再加深咗個 impact of cults of personality 同埋 imperialism within politics, within advocacy, where they even feel a greater dissonance between their roles in the revolution and who's historically and culturally represented in advocacy. So that is something that I thought about as well. 因為而家係有個 term of like madleen effect.
What does it imply?
That implies like 嗰樣嘢令到好多更加多嘅人 join the revolution and like sending more votes and sending more aids, which
Wait, who coined the effect? 係咪啲 media 就係？
Yeah, like
Well,
yeah, there was like that whole like it's something that's circulating. It's called the madleen
I
effect.
feel like if anything, it's just inaccurate.
Right.
It's
Exactly.
just not true.
I know. Definitely. And it's also like people had done it. So I've always said this, like whenever you name, it's fine to name, you know, obviously like your politics and like talk about the patterns and all that, but you have to name the root of your advocacy and ancestral wisdom. And that is indigenous people. That is people of color. That is people of the global north. That is people of the most vulnerable who had resisted authoritarian regimes since always. And that is the big part that, for me, is always 無論我去到邊度係一個 priority to dismantle this narrative where you've become this heroic figure.
Savior.
You've become a martyr. You've become a change maker. Change had always fucking happened. You just weren't there yet. You know, media just wasn't there yet. And also real change happens within the people. The people who fights to exist just as they are every single day, and people that the media doesn't give attention to. People actually that is in your living realities that you don't care to stop and to look and to appreciate and to thank just for them existing. So I think that is a big part where, yes, you think about heroic big acts of doing all these like advocacy work, and that's great, that's valid, but it cannot come without later observation of how you can relate to people around you deeper. How are you becoming a better neighbor? How are you being more supportive in your community? How are you learning to exist and be in community? Because without that, you're still living independently and individualistically, and that is still pertaining to Western and colonizers' values. So until we bridge the gap, until we offer tools for people who are heading that route to do that work, everything else, it's a facade. It's like a foundation that's not there yet. So I think, so you really benchmark things to, you know, mark the progress of our revolution, but the bigger progress should be progress. The bigger progress should be within. And then that extends to the within that is interdependent. So I think 呢個係
其實 Greta 成日都 remind
係呢個就係要 go back into
But to be honest, no, go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it's you go back into having accountability communities 嘅嘢咯. Because we all have shadows, and that's why shadow work and root work is so important. And this is also indigenous, it's not new. They learn to be in community because from the beginning everyone recognizes that they have shadows, and wherever you are, there's a part of who you are that you don't see that only your community can hold you accountable to. So I think 呢個係 within 每一個 culture, 每一個 collective, 每一個 interdependency 都係要 consistently mulch 同埋 take space to nurture a system of care, regardless of how activism and resistance look like for you. Yeah.
To be honest, I feel like you are 10, 20 steps ahead. 即係因為 for me, 即係 as 一個香港人, you know, just like typical, 因為 community to us is such a far away concept. 即係 it's not even, it's so far. 我哋 so far removed from the sense of community. 係啦. To an extent where 我覺得 practically, to be honest, 咧，我見到呢樣嘢 got reported got into even local 嘅香港嘅 media， 我已經係 like oh my god great，
right I understand，
因為啲人係連嗰個 awareness 都未有，首先係當年呢樣嘢都唔 acknowledge 或者唔知道發生之際咧，係冇可能再講到 what you said which is like super important but I feel like that comes after.
Oh absolutely.
Yeah.
我諗我講呢樣嘢 of course 亦都 fully recognize when I come from a place of privilege, absolute immense privilege, to have the experiences but also the ability and bandwidth to consistently be in alignment with these patterns that I'm observing, but also this is built upon the foundation that has to be adaptable within however your circle looks like. And this is where forming a non-hierarchical relation, a decolonized relation to our peers is so important. 因為如果我 come from 一個 place of 覺得有呢兩樣嘢有個分別 then that already makes me not just a purist but also a hypocrite, right? Like you can talk about again就係嗰個 politics 同埋 bridging the gap between living realities 嘅嘢，呢樣嘢係 it has to be adaptable and it has to hold nuances and multiple truths but also with strict boundaries， 即係例如有啲係 fact 嚟嘅，你唔好同我 argue genocide 係一個 nuance, that's a fact, you know these principles are facts， 但係講緊 the adaptation of the practices it has to be maneuverable for it to be radical。即係如果你唔能夠 humanize 個 gap between 你嘅 circumstances 同埋人哋嘅 circumstances， if you're injecting your reality， 唔好話 in activism， 唔好話 in radicalism， that doesn't make you a really great person either. You know, so I think that's like the part that goes back to 我哋點樣去 maintain 一個 like alignment with your internal landscape but also that awareness, that capacity where 當我哋大家又 increasingly like low capacity 嘅時候 can keep each other accountable， 咁呢樣嘢就係 sharing your experience, sharing your tools and resources to make this work, right? So I think decentralizing the practice is a huge thing, and 除咗 decentralizing 之外，下一步就係 making it accessible to people who are exploring what that looks like for them. So I guess
我諗說穿了都係嗰個 awareness 同埋就係啲
說穿了
Oh my god 笑我啲中文 what the fuck guys
I've never heard that.
What is
I know I've never heard of people actually
saying it
That's
Okay, I'm gonna avoid that term entirely. I'm just gonna say ultimately is the 英文 version.
但係說穿了唔係 ultimately，
說穿了係
It's
咩
close enough.
說穿了係
通咗啲嘢
In short.
係咪咧 ？Nutshell
No
我想咁講
In a nutshell 即係 is it like bringing
Okay, I'm gonna give it
Just
context
講
and 你可以
到白咁樣
係啦 yeah
講到明
I'm gonna say in a nutshell I think
Okay
it's a matter of being aware
Right.
of 你自己嘅 stance and also other people's circumstances.
Right.
Also 就係個 empathy 同埋個 capacity to hold space for other people 嘅 stories 同埋 upbringing.
Yeah, and like holding nuance 係重要嘅嘢。It's a skill. It's a skill and it's a craft.
It's a rarity.
It's literally one of the highest virtues. It's a walking, waving green flag.
但我想講
Green
it's
forest.
also discouraged. Like it's discouraged in a sense that 有時 media 嗰啲係用一啲好 grabbing 嘅一啲 titles
right.
又或者 headlines 佢根本唔想要 nuance，即係 they kind of push it to extremes
Of
just to get your
course.
attention. So yeah.
I think like that's why 嗰個 demanding the radical change, radical cultural shift to growing our attention spans again like when we were little and learning in the longer form and longer context. And that's also why we have this podcast. 同埋我覺得我好多例如我 my politics and the way I visualize that 一就係 diversely 同埋我好 me and Aurora, which is my incredible publisher, but we're really good friends first and collaborative partner. 但我哋會 name 佢做 digital analog pulse. It's like we constantly nurture that because it's so important for us to bring the stories into light. 因為好多時你睇個 art, you're like, oh, this is amazing. 但係其實所有嘢都係個 extension of your internal landscape. So it's so important where we're also 即係我 recognize 嗰個 need to 有一個 shorter form context for 例如 momentums, different things 例如要 mobilize 嘅，我亦都明嗰個 you know other side of madleen 就係點解佢要 coin 呢樣嘢就係因為 okay you also need for people who might not have that concept yet they need something to delegate language into to refer to and that's the part that I understand and respect and validate 但係我覺得係要多啲where we're also building upon human stories. We're building upon
for sure.
narrative owning, our own narrative owning, and respecting that 除咗你嘅 narrative 之外，其他嘢都係 others people's to tell. It's not your part. So I think 呢樣嘢係可以 you know, everything works in tandem, but it's one of the things that will continuously allow us to hold space for accountability 但係 to hold change and to hold turbulence and love radical acts of love 其中一樣嘢對我嚟講就係呢樣嘢Oh my god It's kind of cute actually 你可以呢啲雜音擺落去
It's cute but also like 令我諗起啲香港人去日本咯即係 it's ultimately 都係 not being aware
not being aware of the spaces that you're taking up
exactly
that's an important
just awareness dude
I think the big part is how are we holding space for each other to allow us one to be held to hold each other through change and turbulence but also offering the tools and nurture and systems of care needed to explore our roles.
That's it. That's the conclusion.
Yeah.
Yay.
Woo.
Yeah.
Come on, even if it's like poking people's brains slightly and also if you're someone who has more knowledge never come from a place of condescension or like that's terrible man please don't do that that's fucked up 即係有啲似 like 呢個 term it's like oh my god my bones crawl out of my veins 即係嗰個有個 term 咧係嚇你咁都唔知啊 like 咩叫咁都唔知 like people are they're you know, it's fine for people to not know things.
Different experiences, different paces.
Different paces. It's fine for people to have a diverse language and have their own stage of learning. And if you can recognize that, you're a part of the problem. So I think that is something to be accountable to.
Be aware of them.
Yeah. And being braver with 你如果佢係你嘅 friend, you should be able to have honest conversations. You should be able to say, hey, this is inappropriate. And that's how we hold each other accountable. Instead of 有幾個 centralized, soapboxed figures去話俾你知 what you should or should not do because, I think that's not constructive. 同埋而家就係 within 你嘅 circles, I think 同埋嗰個 part 就係 there's so much empowerment within 你個 circle 因為我會覺得如果你 stay in 呢個 collective 亦都代表你哋個 value 大約係差唔多無論喺邊度 So within that be a little bit braver resist a little more and start tabling conversations maybe you were never you never had enough courage to really say to start talking about Palestine start talking about legal violent experience as women to call your racist families out when it's appropriate obviously like safety capacity we need more of that so 我覺得呢個係一個 big calling in and welcoming 去 connect 你個 inherent and innate roles within the revolution and I promise it is so enriching and fulfilling to be in it than to actively deny systems that are actually tearing you apart so as much as we started off with tits this is actually very very
let's go grab lunch
it's the same thing
what actually tits
kind of
tits
liberating
and tits and fascists
tits are liberating literally
okay bye
bye
that was nice
yeah really nice